Hey guys, and welcome back to Trekyards. As always, I'm Captain Foley.
And I am Commander Cockings. Hey guys.
And today we're going to be looking at the Refit. But not just the Refit, Doug Drexler's NX-01 Refit. And we're going to be taking a look at some of the details. Samuel?
Stuart, are you stealing my move there?
I am. I'm playing with my...
I have one too.
I actually have one this time. We got the same one.
But Stuart, we're not just looking at the NX-01 Refit. We've done a great episode with Doug. We are looking at the differences and a direct comparison between the NX-01 Refit and the original NX-01, just like we did with the Akira and the NX-01, with new high-quality renders with both the original NX from the Enterprise show and the Pierre Droulet custom version done for Doug Drexler of the NX-01 Refit, the original one, which these Eagle Moss ships are based off. So this should be hopefully interesting. New angles, new details you haven't really seen before, and direct comparison angles. So I'm excited because I think, I mean, in your brain, are they so similar, or do you know how many differences there are, Stuart? I mean, do you...
Offhand, I'd say the most obvious differences are the ones I know, but there's probably some subtle little things that I never really considered, that's why I love doing the show, because we always see these things with the models and actually find some great discussion points while we're going.
So the first notable difference between the two ships is the hull colour. Now, the NX-01 was not necessarily got at, but it was received less positively by having a very silver, more metallic hull, whereas the TOS Constitution class is a very sort of creamy hull. Doug Drexler modified the hull colour in this progressive step into, I suppose, a smoother, more silvery colour. And when I look at this, I see sort of the hull colour, the hull popping, the hull Aztecing is actually less obvious, which you could say is that one progressive step. They've got a more substantive armour / paint job that makes it a bit more blended.
On the actual model, it seems more of a creamy color, almost like a step towards the Constitution class, kind of like a more blended. You can see some white spots, which is kind of the Aztecing that you just talked about. It just seems a little bit darker on the actual 3D model. I don't know what that's all about.
Well, as we're saying, we have a side shot here of all three ships put together, of the NX Refit and the Connie. And if you look at them side by side, even though it looks darker, actually when you compare the three, clearly is a step in between.
Yeah, it's a nice progressive step towards the TOS Connie in that picture. You can really see the detailing as far as like the color, kind of the progression down to the smooth white that we see in TOS. So yeah, I like that a lot. And then it's like after TOS, they kind of went back to the Aztecing on the Refit a little bit for the Constitution class Refit. So
yeah, I always love seeing renders like this, again with all the real models. You know, these are the real sizes, the real things. I mean, it is step. You know, and you've suddenly got the secondary hull, which we'll talk about in a minute. You've got the pinstriping, which is almost identical. It's such a, you know, it is a natural progression. It's interesting to see a TOSified NX, but it really is. It's a TOSified NX with added vavavoom.
They've even added some of the subtle red striping on it on certain parts of the hull, which I really like. Besides the pennant, of course, which you just talked about. I do like the addition of that to the side of the nacelles, though. I think that really speaks to, I don't know if it's more advancement per se. I don't like the fact that they glow on both sides on the NX. It's always been kind of a sticky point with me, but it's just a personal preference, I think.
Well, obviously, we've got these close-ups of these nacelles. We'll get into, I guess, that detail sort of next. Yeah, the original NX has both grills, which, you know, we theorised that, well, I've said before, is that the Constitution class is all contained, at least, you know, more contained than it feels for these, and it wasn't given the same glow that Gene wanted, so take that into account. The NX is as if it's very raw. They don't have these housings, and then you progress that step. Maybe the power output is so much that you need to have some more armor to keep radiation from spilling. So, whereas the NX has these both grills open, move one step forward. The Constitution, the NX Refit, has an exterior grilling, and then Constitution class then refined the internal grilling. So definitely a step, and it does feel more advanced. It feels a bit more sleek. It takes away some of that color, but yeah. I like it being filled up.
Yeah. While we're on the topic of nacelles, I gotta mention here that on the 3D model, I don't see the little spikies that are on the actual physical model.
That intrigued me too. Yeah.
Because this is right before the cage version, which has the spikes on the nacelles.
Yeah, that intrigued me. I think they added that for creative license, because this is the model, and it is on the 3D model. So, I mean, there you go, guys.
Now, do you like that addition? I think that's a perfect step towards going towards the cage style.
I think it's a bit too early on to add the point. I like
Really?
the one more step. Then you get the point, because the refit. If this is the refit that we don't see, I should say, in the final episode of Enterprise, then it's only 7 years after it was launched. So then that point is meant to be the standard for the next 100 years, 80 years. So no, I would like to see it in between and in between, another step in the step.
Interesting. Well,
But
I like it. I think it's good.
But one thing that you mentioned, what they do have as the Basards, the NX-01 has a glowing, amorphous, particly effect, and that sort of moves. It's far closer to that of the Enterprise D or the Enterprise Z, especially the E, which has that wonderful sort of
plasma, yeah, like a liquid.
Well,
plasma.
absolutely, and it has a more of a cool feel. But the TOS Constitution class obviously has spinning lights. It's Christmas lights. That's what it was. So this NX refit, suddenly you've now got, you can see the and there is actually internal structure of the NX-01. You just can't see them in this still. But suddenly they've cleaned up the nacelle, the Basard, or Doug has, or Pierre I guess has, and you can see the structure a bit more. Maybe it's glow. Maybe it pulsates more. It's Does that progress, do you think, between the two? And do you like now how it's changed?
I do like how it's changed. I personally like that kind of effect. I mean, I
Which
prefer
one?
that,
The new one?
Yeah, like the plasma, like the liquid plasma going on there.
So the NX Classic then?
Yes, and what we see later on the Enterprise E, like you said.
Right, and I will say that between the two Basards, again, the NX is a red, again, linking to the future tech that was what the team came off of. The NX refit, far more orange, far more of a lighter grounded colour to the TOS Constitution class. So another subtle, or not subtle depending on how you look at it, push towards that style of tech. Now, Stuart, it's worth saying that the thing I guess we haven't talked about yet is the secondary hull. I think there's two pictures, 23 and 21 and 22, which show the NX very flat ship. And then the NX refit, suddenly, boom, secondary hull. Visually, going between NX refit, it does change the feel of the ship, and that is obviously where this ship is different. I mean, what do you think of the secondary hull and the difference that it brings between the two versions?
I love the secondary hull. I think it should have been there from the beginning as part of that Enterprise lineage and kind of continuity tie-in. Unfortunately, that's not what the producers wanted, but I think this, like as Doug always said when he was designing the NX-01, he was always holding it up, imagining what a secondary hull would look like on it, because he always intended for there to kind of be this refit, which is the progression or a step towards the Constitution class. So I absolutely love it, and I think it makes this ship feel a little bit more, gives it more gravitas, more presence. It makes it feel like it actually, I don't know. It's lacking something without the secondary hull. Simple as that.
It turns it from the first ship that we used to explore to a ship of the fleet. Everything in one bundle, Yeah. Well, I mean, the secondary hull is a really interesting design choice, and the way he chose to do it. I mean, if we go again back to the shot of all three side by side, is actually a very shallow neck. I know that was the progressive choice, but it's actually very, very, very shallow. I mean, and then you've got how because I do love though how Doug progressed the line of the current pylons into it. So obviously what you have has to be a certain limited scope, which makes it feel very compact and sort of neat. But it's a very, very shallow neck. I mean, it's barely got enough clearing room for the deflector, which obviously compared to the Constitution class, neck galore. So what do you think about that?
But is it a deflector? Because we talked about this in TOS, it was a sensor around the deflector, and then they retconned it for the refit. Anyway, I don't see that being a problem, that it's closer to the saucer like that. I actually prefer that on this look. It makes it look stockier and a little bit more structurally sound for the time. I mean, the TOS is supposed to be an advancement, so the more spindly nacelles, the more spindly neck, that's a little bit longer. That's speaking to future advancement, future tech, more advancement, right? And using your ape brain, The spindly nacelles, really, those engines don't provide thrust per se. So,
yeah.
but I like the squat little look. I think the shorter neck works, and yeah, for the time, I absolutely agree that would be the way it would look. Smaller,
right.
Stouter, and a little bit more structurally sound without going too far advancement.
If we go back to the original 2021, 22, you can see it does. If you agree, it does feel kind of tacked on the secondary hull, as if they sort of sliced through the hull, and you can see on the Eagle Moss model. If you've got an Eagle Moss model, they literally just there's lines where they attached it. It does feel like they shoved it in, as it were, which I kind of like, the sort of tacked on feel. It's not because it's not an Enterprise Z. It's not an integrated hull. It's something different, or it's not a Constitution class. It's not built to have this broad neck, and it's one thing you don't tend to see unless you really look close. It's kind of not wedged in, but they've cut through the hull and then just slid it.
Well, the ship had already proven itself that it doesn't need a secondary hull per se. So the secondary hull we know is just additional power and whatnot. So yeah, of course they just take the existing structure and just get the old sawzall out and cut a big hole, glue it in.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Although still in this picture, some of the subtleties that you wouldn't necessarily know. If you go between the NX-01, some of the NX Refit, the torpedo tubes, from being unseeable almost, now have the familiar red glow of some versions of the Refit and some later. More menacing. I mean, what we theorize, those who think of this in sort of the fan canon genre, as it were. This is the ship that was in the Romulan War. This is that era. So adding that extra something, maybe it's active standby. It is always things in the tubes. That's to represent it. It's a signal. Maybe.
That's interesting, because do they always glow, or do they only glow when they're loaded? I mean, that's one thing with the refit. To get a lighting model for the actual Constitution class refit, sometimes you got just the glowing photon torpedo launchers all the time, and sometimes only when they fire. I prefer to think it looks better when they're lit all the time, in my opinion. But I prefer in real life tech that they'd only be red when they were loaded, to show that they're loaded. But
I agree. But again, this is how the mold comes to default. But again, scrolling back to the NX. It's actually, this is not the beauty angle of the NX-01. It really isn't. Not to say it doesn't look okay, but it's not the angle you'd pick. You scrub back to the NX-01 refit. Actually, it's a very proud angle. And again, back to the subtle details, back to the NX, there are almost no lights on the bottom. This is quite a bright shot, to be fair. And actually, lighting both ships, they light differently because their hulls are differently coloured. But then you scrub back to the NX-01 refit, suddenly, boom, you've got much, much more strong self-illumination on the sides, brightening NX-01, and all these little spotlights. Back to the NX, those little doors, back to NX-01 refit, all with spotlights, a lot more life. And again, subtle thing, the windows, NX-01, all orange, boom, NX refit, on the bottom level, all blue. Don't know why, but it's a subtle choice, a subtle thing that you wouldn't necessarily notice from Doug's, video he's made of the refit, or from our episode. So this is why we're doing this episode, to show you the subtle little details.
Now, speculatively thinking, are you thinking that the interiors of those rooms have changed? Maybe the purpose of those rooms have changed, hence the different colors through the windows?
What's that?
It could be, because you got more room in the secondary hull now for some of those power systems or whatever that might have been down there. Now those could be labs or something else. I don't know. I'm just trying to think in world why through the window it would look a different color.
Yes and no. I think they would all be different, but I don't think that's why they changed the color.
Okay, I just want to talk a little bit about how the secondary hull kind of attaches and the changes they made, to especially the warp stabilizer and stuff. From the
which is the
view.
pod at the back.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, if you take a look at these two pictures, there's a little bit of structural engineering that's gone into making this refit. Some changes that aren't apparent at first, but when you actually start flipping back and forth, you can really see that thought was put into this. The neck is quite substantially thick. If you look in comparison to the Constitution class. Now, whether they're actually physically the same size, but since the Constitution class is bigger, it doesn't appear that way. it doesn't appear as thick. I'm not sure, but I do like the thicker neck. It kind of solves one of the problems that we've seen over the years, or heard about over the years, that's a weak spot. It's going to be a weak spot regardless, but you're only as strong as your shields, basically. So,
which they probably should have at this point, thanks to the Andorian shields or Vulcans and such. Finally, give them shields, guys. One thing I like about this, and again, this is one of the subtleties that you can't really see. If you go to the NX-01 and if you look at the right-hand pylon, wonderful detail. It's sort of there's a lovely little like a welded extra plate connecting it to the impulse, which shows it's not just plug and play. It's been and suddenly you cut straight to the next refit. Boom! There's now actually new plating on the front, and it's bulked up, and that's a distinct. These are super minute changes. You shouldn't notice, but it's always intriguing. As I always ask the designers, you made this blue, you made this red, you made this spinning. Well, why? There's a reason. So why did Doug tell Pierre, or Pierre just do on his own, to bulk that up, or in fact, if you go back and forth, NX to refit to NX, and it's the same exact angle. I mean, it's the same ship, same angle. There is distinct hull geometry difference, and it's quite intriguing. It's so subtle, but it is there.
I would think it would just be something subtle to speak to new, more powerful feeds going up to those nacelles, perhaps. Just something that not a lot of people would notice, because, like you said, not a lot of people notice it. But we're gonna make you notice it, and we're gonna learn you good. That's our job. I never noticed that until you pointed it out. But yeah, it's an interesting, subtle little change for sure.
Yes, and you mentioned the neck. We've got a direct sort of scale equivalency. You can see in the middle of the NX. If this was a Katinga, it would be a torpedo port, but it's not. It's actually a hatch. And the side to side, those are some big doors. So I mean, the neck is like 1-2 rooms, wide, 3 rooms. I mean, it's pretty short. But I mean, if there's a turbo lift, you've got a few things in there, but it's certainly not huge. I do want to obviously. You mentioned about the warp field stabilizer. I mean, straight away you've got it lowered. You've got this. Actually, I love the geometry behind it. I don't know why there's a space there. I love it to bits. I just think it's such a cool. See, that looks to me as if it's designed to plug and play a new module, which is enhanced.
Yeah.
Like that's the NX version. Then they'll slide it out and put in a really big meaty one. That's what it looks like to me, anyway.
Yeah, I can definitely see that aspect of it for sure.
Which I think would be really cool. But one thing you wouldn't notice unless you actually had these models, if you go to the top view, you start out at the NX-01. As soon as you cut to the refit, they actually do change the pylons. The pylons now have been pulled forward and progress in, as opposed to the NX-01, where there's a line of the warp pylons and then the angle is different for the NX. Cut to the NX refit, it's a direct line. And again, you don't notice it from any other angle. I don't know if you noticed it, but if you cut from the NX-01 to refit, it's actually very distinct. And again, these are the smallest things, guys, but that's the point of this episode. We're trying to show you these unknown details.
Something interesting regarding markings, I think, is the fact that on the NX-01, you know how in the Cage Enterprise it's really noticeable because of the white hull, but there's the black stripes on the, not stripes, but sections on the
with the blinkies
on each side. That's noticeable on the NX-01, of course. And we go to the refit, and they've kind of changed it to the same as the hull color, which I think looks cool. I don't have a problem with that per se. I like the addition of the, like I said earlier, of the striping, the red striping, which we see everywhere on the saucer.
Yeah, that's I mean, the difference is pretty striking. I mean, that pops out. I mean, especially when we look at this physical model, that pops. That red pops.
Yeah, I don't know why they would put the red striping specifically there. It's like only really in the middle of the saucer.
I mean, would it have not made more sense to continue that throughout the hull? Maybe some top bits where the pontoons are, and some I don't know. It's trying to grab your eye and make a statement by only being there, but I think it's not trying to make a statement, which is odd because it is making a statement. Again, subtle things, guys. That's part of the fun here. But again, go back to the NX-01, it all integrates, and boom, NX refit. It's all there.
Yeah, I think we need to talk to Doug about those red stripes. They got to mean something.
So a whole episode on the red stripes, Joe.
I think we could probably do that.
Oh God. Stuart, there's one interesting thing we always forget about, actually. I've done some renders of this. Strictly speaking, everything we've looked at isn't the evolutionary jump per se. In the sense that the NX-01 was the first Warp 5 ship. We all know that. It's the NX-01. The next refit is the NX-01 refit. But actually, there was other NX classes. Remember, NX-01 the refit isn't actually canon. I mean, it's pretty close, but it's not, whatever. But there were other NX classes. There was the NX-02 Columbia. I've done a render. This is the NX-01. This is the NX-02. Now, when you look at the NX-02, suddenly, I think you'll agree, the colour scheme, it's a lot more silvery, like the NX-01 refit. Just looking at just an evolution from the NX-01 to 2. It sort of made that jump, sort of. But then, as I'm sure you noticed, I see your face, you then jump the NX-01 refit, the colour changes radically, actually. So go from the NX-01 to 2 to refit. 3 radically different colours, and I'm intrigued as to why. Do you have any ideas?
I would think an advancement in hull plating technology. The polarized hull plating perhaps is more. I suppose it would be beefed up and more advanced a little bit on the Columbia, and then we get to the NX-01 refit, and again, I think they would have shielding by this point, but they would also have the polarized hull plating.
I would assume
probably the next evolution of it, like Windows 10 as opposed to Windows 7 or something. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll skip 8 of hull plating, please.
But yeah, I it's a very good question. It's a subtle thing. Maybe they just ran out of that color paint. I don't know.
That is what happens in Starfleet in the organizations. Ironically, when I proposed this, I had thought that Doug made a mistake. He should have made the refit that NX-02 color, because that's the evolutionary thing. But I hadn't linked in, actually, yes, that could be the NX-02 color, but then actually that evolves into the NX-01 refit. They just repaint the 01 to match the newest. Although there is the one reason why, I guess in my head, that wasn't my first assumption, is because the NX-01 has the single point deflector. The NX-02, the evolution, has a different deflector design and a double point. But then the NX-01 refit, literally is the same. It's the same deflector as the first one. That's sort of the point. But surely you would refit, if you refit the entire secondary hull, you'd improve it with a second deflector. This is when obviously Doug designed the refit, not the Columbia. I think Rob Bontroon, in fact, made most of the changes to the Columbia.
Yeah.
He also wanted his baby to be upgraded, not the canonical next step. So what do you think about that? Having a, I guess, wrongly evolving deflector?
I would disagree with you there.
Hey, go for
Columbia was the next step, adding more sensor technology to that front deflector. But then when you go to the secondary hull configuration, where you got the bigger main sensor dish, most of those improvements and upgrades to the Columbia would be incorporated into the larger dish. So the primary, or the one on the hull, on the primary hull, the saucer section, wouldn't necessarily need to be upgraded. In fact, I probably assume that the whole purpose of that front one on the saucer had actually changed by that point. Probably a lot more of the sensing and deflector capabilities has gone to the bigger dish, and that one was used more as a passive, or as a standby one, perhaps a secondary one, in case the primary one failed. Would be my thinking, but again, I could be wrong. I don't know why the dual prongs on the Columbia exist, but assuming that, okay, let's say that does become a secondary deflector, use when the primary one fails, you'd almost think that it should be upgraded to the Columbia one, because the Columbia one's obviously better than the NX-01s. So it's kind of an odd conundrum we find ourselves in with that, because but what are the chances of your main primary deflector failing, I guess? So
I absolutely agree with everything you just said, and I hadn't thought about it that way. I guess where I was coming from is that I would assume that the NX-01, as its lifespan would increase, would continuously get the improvement. So it would get the NX-02 Columbia's deflector. It's not, they wouldn't stick with that they wouldn't stick with the inferior dish for the 5 years until the refit and then say, oh, we don't need the improved dish. Surely they would come back after year 4 and say, ooh, shiny.
Shiny.
You know, so I would assume that would be the standard, and so to go then, but assuming the way you said is that the NX-01 never got refit until the refit.
Yes.
Okay, it makes sense, Stuart. It makes sense. I want to show one more cool thing before we, I guess, close out. The front of the ship. Just compared to
the front shot of the ship is absolutely my all-time favorite for the ship.
Of which one? The refit, I take it?
The refit, yes,
okay.
Absolutely. Again, it goes back to what I was talking earlier about the squat nature of the design. You don't see the neck from the front, and it looks very cool the way that they've got that tucked up in the saucer, and then the cells are more out. I absolutely love that. Yeah. So, my favorite view of the refit for sure.
Yeah, I think, you know, going between the NX-01 to the refit, I mean, the NX-01 has that. I do like how thin it is. I like that it is so close to the edge of space sort of vibe. I dig that, and it's an unusual ship to render because you have to take that into account. Cut to the refit, yeah, it feels squished though, but not very much, just a bit, but it kind of works with its unique feel.
Yeah,
you know, you would assume it would have more of a, you know, you'd assume the nacelles would go like that and be more of a direct point, but it's not. It's a very odd angle to continue the perspective. I do like you're right how it connects super, like we have a budget almost. We're gonna just make it work. But did you realise actually how oval the
I was just going to mention that. No, I didn't realize that until seeing this. It is very squat compared to the Constitution class, but that, in a way, I think this visually from the front ties in with the Enterprise E. It's almost like an integrated hull from the front, and the Enterprise E, the bottom, the way it's shaped. I mean, I can see this. Yep. Put the Enterprise E right beside this, and I think you'd see a lot of similarities. Even the placement of those engines kind of being out farther and not pulled in a little bit like the Constitution class was.
And it is a different shape. I think most people would assume it was a Constitution class, a secondary hull, and even the fact that you've got that really cool sort of cowling, that two levels, which again isn't part of the other. It is a distinctly different feel. Although the deflector is just the colony deflector, I love that to bits.
Yeah.
But I like the two levels of armor. It feels different.
Yeah.
It's cool.
And I think I kind of fell into the trap that I think a lot of our viewers probably have done, is that when we saw the refit of the NX-01 initially, usually it's from the side or whatever, you assume that that's just the secondary hull is exactly like the Constitution class secondary hull, round. It's got the cutout a little bit deep, you know, farther up, obviously, but I always assumed it was round. And now looking at this, it's actually amazing how much how squat it is. And I do like that additional plating along the top. I think that's very cool. Yeah, and if you go straight to the back view, I don't know, do you see anything in the comparisons if we go from the NX-01 to refit at the back? I mean, just the on the side of the nacelles, the outer casing, the way they have it, it doesn't look like the nacelles were necessarily replaced. It looks like they just basically added some extra shielding to the exterior there. Yep. Oh, I agree completely. It's a very nice addition, not reinvention. It's a refit, not a well. Ironically, it's a real refit as opposed to we're going to change out half the pieces refit, as it did for the refit. But hey, it's all good. There's lots of little subtle things. I mean, I'm scrolling again from the NX-01 to the Columbia to the refit. I mean, one little thing I'll put a little red circle to know the audience knows what I'm talking about. You know, cut from the NX-01 to the refit. Suddenly, the marking, the sort of double, almost rectangle markings on the pontoons at the back, they're gone. I don't know why. If you look just behind the superchargers, as Doug says, there's those two little slits on the NX-01 and NX-02 Columbia. There's a little circle thing with a rectangle. NX-01 refit, it's gone, integrated more. I do think the whole thing, they've integrated the colours, they've made it a lot less punchy. They've tried to create that Constitution class feel while you're still using the same design. I mean, you can definitely see, you know, Columbia to NX-01 refit. I mean, look at the Azteci on the hull. Look at the top of that saucer on the sort of left of it, I guess. Pops and then boom, refit.
I mean, it still reflects if you light it, but I mean, it is so much more subtle. I think that was, I guess, apart from the secondary hull, that was their biggest progressive step, was pulling back on the Aztecing, was making it more integrated, because you can see that step. I think we'll go to sort of the last picture, which is that 3-shot of seeing the evolution, and I think you can see there is something to that.
I would 100,000% agree.
That's a lot of agreeing. Thank you.
Great progression. I actually really love the refit. I think it's fantastic. I would have loved to see it, especially in that final episode of Enterprise. I mean,
yeah.
it would have helped with the whole holodeck program thing. It would have just kind of been a nice nod to, like...
Yeah. Well, I guess one last question to you, Stuart. And we have done episodes on the refit before, but do you think it's almost a forcing to meld the two? Like, if you were doing a real redesign, would you not just combine the shapes and make the entire middle space hull to give extra volume? Why would you add a secondary hull if not knowing the Constitution class has a secondary hull in the same form?
That's interesting.
Or why not connect the pontoons at the back, as we've also said before? What if you connect all of that into one big hull? I mean, you've just massively increased the potential of the ship. Massively.
That's probably what I would have done for a refit. This does seem tacked on and whatnot, but at the same time, when you're doing this kind of advancement of a ship, you don't want to make it too complicated. And to actually attach those pontoons and everything, you might as well just build a new class of starship. This, they could build that secondary hull in a dry dock, have the Enterprise come in, and a few months after be heading out with that attached. I mean, it just makes sense. And then of course, I know that you had mentioned that, assuming that we didn't know the TOS Connie existed with the secondary hull the way it was, but it's a natural evolution to follow that. After this advancement made such a big difference to the NX-01, as far as a secondary engineering hull goes, next class of ship, just let's get rid of those pontoons, and it just works. So
I think this is like the truest 1.5 of any ship in Star Trek. It's not a 2, but boys at 1.5.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's a refit. I think that's a good way of closing. So there you go, guys. The 3 ships, the sizing. I hope you guys have enjoyed the seeing these ships. I mean, I love doing these renders. I think you all do. Trust with these assets and be able to show you details you've never seen before. Honestly, we guys are geeks. All of us, we're nerds. This is excessive, but it's fun. You come here for this sort of stuff, so we want to give you these sorts of episodes.
If you like this video, please click the like button. Don't forget the little subscribe button as well. I mean, subscribe to us and you'll get to see us on a more regular basis with all the content we produce, which is a lot, I might add. And if you want to be notified every time we get an upload, or we do upload, please click the little notification icon beside the subscribe button, because that really helps you out and it helps us out as well. So, and please share this video around to anybody that you think might like it. A lot of people like Star Trek and don't even know that we exist, so share it to Twitter, Tumblr, wherever you want to share it, and we would definitely benefit from that. So,
but there are direct ways that we can benefit from your support, and that's by donating towards the show. We spend a lot of time, as I said, on this content. It takes time, which takes money just to support us, to put the time in. So there's 2 ways. A one-time donation, if you can only support a bit here and there. That's over at trekyards.com. Click that donate button and give what you can. A 10, a 15, a 50. We get actually quite a lot of 50s. Okay, actually people like to give us 50. I don't know why. It's a good number. We love it. Thanks so much. Or Patreon, which is our monthly donation service. Rather than buying those 10 cups of coffee in a month, put those $2, $3 each time, and just send Trekyards way, and we can bring even more great episodes like this on an almost daily basis sometimes. So help us if you can, and if not, like I said, just share it. And tune in, I guess, for the next Trekyards special.
Alright guys, so until next time, I'm Captain Foley.
And I am Commander Coggins.
And we'll see you guys soon. Bye everybody.
Bye guys.